All right, we're here with member and former member. I guess, are you a former and future member? How would we
Sure,
describe Ken?
sure. That'd be a good way to say it.
So Ken, as a member of our group, used time to write his book, Letters to My Son in Prison, which a lot of us know about. We were in group with him, and he is our guest for a very special Friday stuff. So Ken's gonna talk about his book a little bit and the process. And I think we'll bust in with some questions. Feel free to bust in with questions at any time. And Ken will answer them. We've got Ken for 40 minutes max or whatever time we need.
Awesome. Well, guys, great being with you. Yeah, I did publish my piece finally. Took 7 years. That's all. Took a long time. Of course, the story had to unfold and ripen and get to that point where you can write about it, right? Because, at first it was just a collection of actual letters from my son, between my son and I in prison. So the backstory is this. I live in Santa Clarita, so the north part of LA. I've lived here for many, many years. In the late 90s, late 90s, I became the pastor for our church out here. And my three sons were just about teenagers. They were just entering adolescence. I have three boys, very close in age. So at that time it was 13, 12, and 10. I served in the ministry, way early, but at the time I wasn't doing it. I was in pharma. Anyway, so I went back in the ministry. Things went great for a while. Then things started to kind of spin out of control. As you can imagine, boys hitting adolescence, kind of all together, it can become squirrely, and it did. They started to synergize off each other, and after 2 or 3 years, things kind of spun out of control. Substances became a big issue with them. Sequentially in high school, it was weed and alcohol, and of course that graduated to other things in their 20s. So all three, tragically and maybe shockingly, all three of my sons really struggled for at least a period. And my middle son, his struggle with heroin ended when he killed a man here in Santa Clarita in 2016. He rear-ended a cyclist. The gentleman's head hit his windshield. He somersaulted over the car and tragically passed. It was dead even before he hit the ground. So my son went to prison, and as you could imagine, my feelings, my sentiments towards him were pretty raw at the time. I was really pissed. And of course, this was 10 years into a very challenging time. So I write about that. And of course, the early writing was raw, maybe too raw, maybe not reflective enough. And I think that's true. But I started writing him in 2016, slowly. I wrote one letter while he was in LA County jail that was just completely inappropriate. I mean, way off base, just too revelatory, too detailed, and in fact, so bad.
Is that in the book? Is that letter
in the book? Oh, painfully, I had to put it in the book. It's so bad that the DA put my letter in evidence against my own son. I know. Don't think less of me, Ray. I can see you looking down your nose at me. No, I'm just teasing. Ray's like, who's this dude?
No judgment here.
Okay.
No judgment here.
Amen.
I have 4 kids myself, so.
Okay.
Yeah, Ray helped convict me, so don't worry about it.
I'm just teasing, but you can imagine how I felt, right? I mean, what a knucklehead dad I am. Anyway, so there was that at the one end of the spectrum, and then a couple months later, he called me from LA County. He said, "Hey, Pops, there's a guy named Preacher Man in here," and he told me, and he peppered me as to why I was in jail, which you're not supposed to ask, but he did. He pushed him. Lucas, my son, that's my son's name, and Lucas said, "Okay, I accidentally killed a man, DUI, blah blah blah." And Preacher Man said to Lucas, "Well, David killed a man." Luke was like, what do you mean David? Well, David in the Bible, David and Bathsheba, blah, blah, blah. And so he told him that story, and Lucas called me and said, what, is that true? And we talked about the story. I said, yeah, I mean, David was exemplary in many ways, but he was an asshole in other ways. And namely that he slept with a gal, impregnated her, and then had her husband killed. Then he married her. Solomon is actually their son. I know, kind of crazy. But, it's the old Leonard Cohen, when David, he saw her bathing on the roof, that story. So I thought, how cool would it be for me to write that story as if I was David, being tempted by the Bathsheba when I saw her on the roof, and just tell him the whole story as a novel, kind of a piece of fiction, which I did. I mean, it was, now, to write about something in the Bible at that point was really hard. It was new for me because, to be honest with you, I hadn't opened a Bible in 10 years. I was completely flatlined with religion, with God, with prayer, with anything. Not that I hadn't cursed God, but I hadn't, I was just flatlined. So to open up, and remind myself of what happened with Bathsheba, Uriah was her husband. Here's what David did. He called it back for battle. To get the narrative, the pieces of the story was weird. It just felt weird. It was right here at my desk, right here, like a brown Bible right over there. And it was the first time. And when you've had a life, you've had another life, and then you're away from it for 10, 15 years. It's weird getting back into that life, isn't it?
Yeah. Is your son clean now, or did he get clean in prison? Or
He did. So I'm sensing I'm dragging the story. So anyway, the point is that, so I wrote him this David letter, and it went for 40 pages. Anyway, it started this letter writing mania between us. He loved it. I loved it. Which, is as helpful to me as it was for him. So this symbiotic relationship between Lucas getting himself clean, me kind of getting my own self revived, and then back and forth, letters, visits, phone calls over the course of, the prison sentence was 10 years. But California has a very aggressive milestone program where if it's a nonviolent crime, which this was because it was involuntary manslaughter, not murder, right? So there's a difference in how the state treats your ability to whittle the sentence down. Because it's involuntary, he whittled it down. Anyway, so this letter writing goes on, and Lucas changed his life. And in him changing his life and me helping him change his life, it changed my life. So as a father and son, it was an amazing connection. Amazing, just awesome. The book only has very little of it is letters. It's really a story of how did Lucas and I come back together? How did he change his life? And I'll tell you, quite honestly, it's mostly through his reading, Dostoevsky, Steinbeck, Vonnegut, Mount of Monte Cristo by Dumas. I mean, these are the kind of books he was reading. And I mean, devouring, like mind swarm devouring, books on evolution, books on, C.S. Lewis. So, I mean, to look at his reading list for the last 2 years in prison is mind blowing. But he did attend a few AA meetings. AA for him was not his jam, has just never been his jam, his road to recovery. But it was through just immersion in literature. And so his mind, as we were talking, his mind's changing. And so I'm helping him, he's helping me. So it is this beautiful narrative of how a father and son come back together, how his son cleans up his life, how my wife and I managed. We've been married 41 years now, but let's face it, addiction is hard on any family. So we had our moments, we had our tense moments, we had our moments where Joyce, my wife, got desperate and dropped the "I couldn't live with myself" line, which for me that shut everything down. But I talk a lot about how Joyce and I handled things through the marriage, through this period, through the addiction, as things led up. So it's really part marriage memoir, it's part parenting memoir, and it's part spiritual memoir, because the David letter was was really the first moment where I kind of, like I said, I hadn't opened a Bible in years. And then, through the next 3 years or 2.5 years, I had to come to a place outside of the walls of religion, outside of what I knew to be a Christian faith. I had to rediscover that and recharacterize it and understand it differently. So I write about this. I had a wonderful moment in the Sierra. I have a camper van. I get up to the Sierra quite a bit. So that's my place.
So it took you, you started the book 7 years ago. It took you 7 years to do the book. Did the arc of the book, when you were writing it, change from the initial idea? So you have this idea to write a book in 2016. By 2023, what changed within the original concept?
A lot changed. At first it was just a bunch of emotional letters, but there was a moment where I did a reading of what happened in my family to several people, and one lady says, "Well, Ken, that's interesting what happened, but why did it happen? What did you do as a parent? What did you learn as a parent?" And as soon as that was asked, I had this pathetic answer. I had the worst answer a memoirist can have, the worst. And basically, I don't know. It's a big cloud to me, which, you can't write a book when it's a cloud. Now, you can start writing a book when it's a cloud, and it helped clarify and move the fog, but it was a big cloud. And she just said, very kindly, "Ken, you can't, you have no memoir if you can't answer that question." So I went back.
Was she right?
Dead right. I mean, dead right. So I went back and I started writing scenes from their teenagehood. What happened? I'm in the ministry. I'm getting all this pressure from my higher ups and parents in the church. And I got my sons down here doing this crazy crap, right? And I felt all this pressure. So I start writing scenes. And then my sons and I and their wives, we play pickleball on Sunday afternoons. So we always play every Sunday afternoon. And then we get in the jacuzzi. I have a jacuzzi. We get in the jacuzzi and we just talk. And we have this great time. And then we have dinner. And so this became the pattern. I just said, "Hey, Jess, my oldest son, hey, do you remember when you and I went to In-N-Out, when you said you weren't going to be part of the church anymore?" "Oh, yeah, yeah." "Do you remember when I said no to this winter formal, this dance, that you wanted to go to, and then you did this, And so we start talking about what happened in our family, and it became clear. So then, through the course of writing scenes, talking to my sons over and over. And then, of course, Luke got out in 2019 as I'm still writing this and doing this. And so, yes, was I able to answer the question, what happened? Yes. Was I able to answer the question, what did you learn as a parent? Yes. And I write about it in the book. And I'll answer it real quick, just for whatever it's worth. And that is, follow your gut. Don't let people, your senior pastor, your in-law, whomever, influence you. Now listen, learn, educate your gut, be receptive, be humble, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, what I didn't do, and what I would suggest to any parent, and Barb, when I heard your interview with Nate, I thought about it. I thought, okay, here's a woman. And do you remember how Nate, he didn't diss you, but he kind of, this is a podcast he was on, he was like asking you some kind of potent questions. Like I almost thought you were going to start either getting mad or start crying. I don't know if you, but anyway, Nate was at this gentleman on a podcast. And I thought to myself, Barb did what Barb knew that she could do. She is not this guy. She's not me. She did, as the mom, what she could do in her situation. And I was proud of you for that. And I thought that was a powerful thing. And, that's what I've said, Tim, to people that are reading my book. I'm getting, of course, incredible feedback. And that's a big question people have. What the hell did you learn? And that's it. And a lot of people resonate with that and say, you know what? Yeah, I listen to parenting podcasts. All my sons have kids now, right? So they're listening to all the podcasts. They getting advice from me. But I'm telling them, look, you and your spouse, you create a gut. You have a collective gut. Your bacteria, your gut bacteria all works together to create this approach that you should employ with your kids, and never let me or what my wife say to you. If you want advice, you can get it. But at the end of the day, especially at those moments And I talk about those moments, those pivotal moments where my family started to spin. It wasn't, as you know, 99% of your parental decisions, Ray, am I right? They're not that big of a deal. But there's that 1%, right? Where it's pivotal, and if you get that one wrong, you can see some crap. I don't know if you agree with that.
Now, was there a tipping point, Ken, that obviously when you sent that letter that was used against your son, I'm sure that letter is based in anger and accusation. Was there a tipping point that personally you said, he's exactly where he should be, the bastard, to we've got to get him out of here. I can't wait for him to get out of here. Was there a key moment? Or was it just time?
It was just time. You know, the David letter, he responded he loved it. Just said, Dad, I read it on my top bunk, and I cried. That was, I don't know, 6 weeks in, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's cool. Right. And so then there was another moment when he apologized at his sentencing. So he got a 10-year sentence. And then the TV cameras were there because it was a high profile case, just because the gentleman he killed was a really beloved school teacher in our valley. So the cycling community, the education community, everybody wanted to make sure Lucas got his ass kicked. Right. And the just sentence. Anyway, so during the sentencing, Luke, even though the cameras were on, his hands were cupped behind his back, which was really weird in the middle of a courtroom. But anyway, and Snot actually, as he's apologizing to the widow, Snot is actually hanging from his mouth like a foot. Snot hanging down. Finally, his lawyer reached over with a Kleenex and wiped it off. But anyway, the point is that when I saw stuff like that, I'm sitting right behind him, 10 feet behind him. When I saw that, and I saw him start to read, you know what I mean? Your feelings as a dad become more warm, right? You're not just such an asshole. Now it was probably 2 years before I had the thought. So he finished Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky about 2 years in, and he wrote me a letter, and in it he really poured out his heart. He said, Dad, it was midnight last night when I finished. The book was on my chest. Everybody was asleep. The room was silent. And I just stared at the ceiling, and I include this letter, of course, in my book. But, he just said, like Raskolnikov in the book, who also had killed a man and got 10-year sentence. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm being born again. I feel like I have a second chance. I'm exactly where I need to be. I need to be here. And for the first time, I'm comfortable here. I know I need to be here. But I for the first time, also see that I can have a life. So, Tim, if there were a moment, that would be it.
Yeah.
That was the first time I thought to myself, oh, my God, this kid may actually change.
Are any of the people in the community, especially those that might have really wanted to stick it to your son upon his arrest and arraignment, do you think any of them have read the book, or has anyone reached out to you?
Lucas is doing really well. We're close.
And I meant in a positive
way. No. I know. I'm going to get to that. So I just want you to know he's doing well. He married a gal right here, lives 5 minutes from me. He's got a kid now. He's doing really well. But to be honest, the book's been out 3 weeks. He supports it 100%. But it's hard. It's very hard for him. He's not where I'm at. To have his worst moment of his entire life broadcast to the world in a community where he's rebuilt a life is very hard for him. So I haven't even really pushed the book locally. In fact, yesterday I just canceled 2 library readings and a newspaper article. They wanted to interview me, and I canceled all 3. I just said, look, it's not like he's fallen off the wagon. He's doing great. I just don't want to put pressure on him, because we all know, it's hard to rebuild your life. Do I wish we could share a stage together? Do I wish he was on this podcast and us talking about this great fight? Sure, but it's just not. That's not it. So has that community commented? No. Do they know about the book? I have no idea. There will be a point where I promote this because, as you know, I mean, my town's almost 500,000 people. It's a big city, and anytime a local author does something, it's it's of a note. But I just want to make sure that I protect my son, and I don't want to put pressure that I might regret. Anyway.
Was there any thought about using a pseudonym for you as a writer? And
Yeah.
And you shot that down.
I
Why?
did, yeah. I don't know. It feel wrong to me.
Okay.
I mean, if Luke said, I told Luke, but in body language as well as words, up until last week, I said, listen, son, right before we launched, I said, honestly, you want to put this on hold just for a little bit? Anything. He constantly said, look, there are people, there are parents like you that need this book, and I want it in the world. So he supported it, but I forgot the question you asked me. Kind of went up on that. Anyway, so
others.
yeah, I almost pulled it. I mean, I was willing to pull it, not publish, but yeah. So I just couldn't do a pseudonym. No, I couldn't. I don't know why. Just couldn't do it.
So tell us about your writing process. Was there a point that you kind of dried up for ideas or had a pause? And what was the most challenging part of actually getting the book out?
Yeah, I mean, learning to write well is freaking hard. It's just, come on. You know, finding your voice is hard. I can't believe how many freaking words I've written over the last 7 years. And I just found it. You know, I honestly feel like I found my voice. And ironically, it was right when the book ended. Yeah. You ever done a home improvement project and you learn all these things about, how to do something, and right when you finish the project, you're like really good and you blew it. All these, kind of how I feel.
But with the editing and revision process, you already had your voice. That must have helped, right? When you went back.
No, it did. And so, but truly finding my voice, ironically, as soon as I turned in the manuscript to my publisher, I did assisted self. So publish is assisted self-publishing. They're not self, they're not hybrid, they're right in the middle. As soon as I turned it in, I started writing essays. I have a newsletter that I just started. So I'm going to continue writing. And every week I publish a newsletter. I just finished a piece called Lunch with a Narcissist. Anyway, and Lucas, by the way, my son, edited it, had this, he's my new critique partner. Anyway, so I wrote these essays. I just, I was done with the book. So I thought I'd start writing all this different stuff. And all of a sudden I start to really find my voice. Yes, my voice is in the book, but really finding my voice, I think, is maybe a constant evolutionary process. But learning how to write well, to me, that's the biggie. And I'm not even suggesting I write well. All I'm saying is, for me to get to I knew that there would be a day that I would say, okay, that's it. This is a piece I can be proud of. Maybe not 100% proud of, but I can be proud of. And I got to that day, but it took a hell of a long time. Editing,
your
classes.
Your inner editor was screaming at you in the beginning, huh?
It was what it was, but it wasn't. I knew it wasn't good. It wasn't there yet, right? So yes, I spent a lot of money getting to this point. Editors, joining your class, joining other classes, readings, online, critique part. Gosh, and it was great. I had a great time. I wasn't anxious. I knew the story needed to marinate. So, I absolutely loved, this has been maybe one of the most enjoyable things in my life, has been this process, because for me, writing is therapy. And I know that's cliche, but it is. It just is. It helps me figure out what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, whether my feelings are right. Although I journal every day, right? That's like narcissists, for example. And
How much, I'm just curious here, how much editing did you do of the letters in the book? Because obviously a letter to somebody is personal. You're not looking at, fine-tuned grammar and things like that. Did you have to do a lot of editing in the letter? And obviously you didn't change the meaning of the content per se.
Yeah. And I put that in the author's note that, this is not the actual letter. So yeah, it's edited, it's improved, it's clarified. Yeah. For the purpose of the book.
Now your son edited your essay. Does he have a book in him?
No, certainly not about this. At least not now. He's 30, what is he, 36? Yeah. You know how it is at 36, you're trying to get your life together, trying to make a living, you got young kids, you know what I mean? It's a whole different world.
See, maybe like, a book he could write would be Letters My Father Wrote to the District Attorney.
That's mean. Mean.
But it's a really great book. I found it very well written and interesting. And we talked earlier about, being true to it, being true to the feelings without trying to lighten it up. And you said you might have struggled with that. Was that another inner editor thing? Like,
It
this
was
is too serious, this is too difficult.
Look, it's a strong cup of coffee, but the subject's a strong cup of coffee, right? And as people have read it, there's people emailed me that said I can only read a chapter a day. It's that intense. Because if you've had a kid in the ballpark of what I write about here, it brings back some really strong memories. Really anything of this nature. So yes, and to be honest, I do kind of feel I wish I'd put a little bit more maybe positive stuff about Lucas at the beginning, just to, I don't know, maybe round it out a little bit. But you said, well, strong is strong, and maybe that's fine.
But if you look, you look at what he went through as the disease model, which, some people look at the disease model, oh, it's a great disease until like someone else gets hurt. But the bottom line is he was dealing with a disease that was going to kill him. It's a chronic, life-threatening disease, and he is in remission. So does that shine through in the book?
Does. Well, let me back up. The word disease doesn't even show up in the book, at least that narrative or that explanation. And to be honest, I don't get much into the addiction thing. It's out of my wheelhouse. I do have a chapter where I talk about this odd relationship that I have with addiction. That did you read the book Beautiful Boy by David Sheff? So he's really on the addiction side.
Yeah.
Right. He's not me. I'm on the marriage side, the dad side, the spiritual side. But David Sheff's dedication to his son's addiction troubled me in a good way. It made me doubt my own, not interest in it, but my own commitment to my son's addiction and all that stuff. But I don't get into that just because it's
a whole separate tangent. That's another book on itself.
It's just a whole different thing, and it doesn't interest me, and I'm not good at it. I don't.
Oh, understood.
Yeah. Yes, Barb.
Anyone else in group have any? As we've having this discussion, have a question or a comment for Ken? Barbara?
I do. Well, I can so relate to Ken's story. I've read his book. I absolutely loved the book. It was hard for me to read too, because, I lost my son, and my son was a heroin addict, and my son's been in prison and all of this. And, but I think what you just said, what Tim just said about, showing Lucas in a better light at the beginning or something. I mean, that's what we want to do. We want to defend our son and tell the world, my son's a good kid. They're not a bad person. And I don't know, it totally came across in your book that how much you loved him, what a good dad you were, that you admit to your mistakes. And I really enjoyed it. I thought you did an excellent job. That's all I wanted to say.
where's your wife in all this? Take us back to the beginning. Was she, and I hate to, pardon me if I screw up the question that I'm trying to get at, but did she first of all, did she feel complicit in where he wound up? And secondly, how did she feel about this correspondence and the book that came out of it?
I'll answer the second one, the last one first. She feels awesome. I mean, it's our way to help a lot of people, right? And we love that. We want to help people. So she's in her little office, marketing and emailing people, right? So I mean, she's loving it. We're both loving it. It's reconnected with us with hundreds of people from our past. So super tight there. But addiction was hard. Did she make mistakes? Yes. Was she a little bit enabling? Yes. Can you emphatically or empirically say that was wrong? I don't even want to go down that part.
Yeah.
My tack was, as things evolved, was more military. Hers was not, right? And now, at least for me, Ray, I needed the marriage to last. Felt like I'd lost all three of my sons, and I had for a period, and there was a very distinct period where Joyce's tack was A and mine was B. And I said, I'm going with A, because if I lose my three sons and my wife, well, who wins here? Right. And I write very clearly about this in the book, that I needed there to be an us. I needed there to be an us. But yes, she learned her lessons. We both have learned our lessons. Our pressure was, as the pastor, I had an added measure of pressure, right? I had senior people over me telling me what to do with my kids, right? So, I mean, who knows what would have happened if I wasn't in the ministry, but I was. And so and Joyce reacts a certain way, I react a certain way. The pressure comes down from, right? And my church starts to freak out. There was all these things going on. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Am I?
Yeah, you are. I was curious because I imagine her story is as voluminous as yours in all this. And I know my wife and I struggle with the same thing. I mean, she's got her approach and I've got my approach, and she's a little more enabling and I'm a little stricter. And so the dynamic was, I was curious about the dynamic, and it sounds very similar to our own.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't have any, we're fortunate. We don't have any substance abuse that we know of in the three older ones, but they're all three sort of lost right now. We got one that's just out of college, one that's in college, and one that's going back to college, and none of them seem to know what they want to do. And so yeah, it's certainly not a problem on the magnitude of
Right.
heroin and that kind of thing, but it's, as a parent, it's still a problem, because it goes back to what you and Barbara are both saying, and it's that you want the best for your kids, and you want to do right by them,
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what can I do to help you? And it
Yeah,
sounds
and
like
it's interesting as the books come out, the parenting part, how it is when you write a book, you don't know what's going to resonate. You don't, like, people, they'll reinterpret my book. I'm like, did we read this? Is that the same book? Right. But it's a parent. Yeah, I know. And so many parents, like in your situation, may not have the drama of LA County jail or heroin, right? But they got their own, you got your own thing. And
Yep.
and to read one person's account of how they came to clarity, it's just interesting. How did the husband and wife manage? How did they come to clarity on parenting? If I read your story, it would enlighten me. You read my story, it will enlighten you. It may embolden you. It may give you more confidence and say, you know what, we are doing the right thing, and we just need to let things evolve or whatever, right? I just think parents need, I think there's a real need in the world for parents to, I guess, to come to some more confidence in how they're doing and really leaning into their own intuition.
Boy, I sure agree with that 100%, because I have followed, I didn't have a husband, and I followed my gut, but you guys are talking, I'm thinking that, you know, I've talked to hundreds of parents, and it's usually the mother that is the one that is more enabling, and that, because that's what a mother's heart wants. They want to make everything okay. But oh God, now I lost my train of thought. Shoot, something about men, women, husbands. I don't know. I
You
lose
can
my.
say a lot about men, I'm sure.
Oh, sometimes that's what I was gonna say. Sometimes I do wish I would have had his father involved, because it may have balanced things out better, but you know, just didn't happen that way for
Yep.
us.
Yeah.
All right, we should probably be wrapping things up. If anyone has any last comments, Ken, if you've any last comments or.
No, I think it's just, it's been phenomenal. I'm so glad I did this. I'm so glad that I persevered. I'm glad I self-published. I don't know if I'm gonna, marketing's its own whole different animal, and I'm learning that right now. But yeah, it's been incredible, been life-changing for me. My son and I are bonded, all three of my sons. So, it's a good ending. It's a tragic ending for the family, the man who died and his wife. I pray and hope, one day that, my son will receive her forgiveness, but you don't know. You just don't. Forgiveness is not contingent on her. I think he's found forgiveness. I found forgiveness. We're controlling what we can control. If one day Valerie is her name, comes into our life and would be gracious enough, to forgive him, come on, that would make my whole life. But I don't need it. I'm just saying it would make his whole life and my whole life. But anyway, so yeah, it's been great. Thank you guys. Been great talking with you.
Thank you, Kim. That was great.
Awesome.
Good luck with marketing. That's what I'm doing, and